Hello and welcome to Supercharging Communication, how modular content can improve your connection with clients. I am 𝗕𝗆𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃, Head of Public Relations at VISEVEN. I will be your host and moderator for the next hour. Today we are launching a brand new format and hope you will enjoy it as much as I will. So thank you so much for joining us. Today we'll talk about pharma marketing, content approaches, modular content strategy, and so much more. Among the topics we'll address will be the evolution of content creation and management, how to overcome common pitfalls and organizational hurdles, the benefits of introducing modular content approach, as well as some of the hands-on subjects like best practices and key success factors in implementing modular content. I must say, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce you to our speakers today. Natalia Andreychuk is the CEO of VISEVEN. Natalia has over 15 years of experience in digital pharma marketing. She is one of the leaders in implementing new approaches to digital pharma marketing. She has been in the industry for a very long time, and among her clients are top 50 pharma companies around the globe. Daniel Lawrence has studied computer science and has worked in different industries. Since joining Bayer in 2015, he has supported different projects in his current role. He is responsible for the operation and further development of content and campaign platforms for Bayer Radiology Global Strategic Marketing. Julian Hacker is Bayer's digital and content strategy lead. He and his team are responsible for global and local content design and production. Within that scope, he builds and runs content platforms, processes, and in-house content services. Before his global role, he drove the digital transformation of Bayer's US oncology franchise. René Crawling is the managing consultant for life sciences at Campana & Schott, a management and technology consulting firm. He specializes in driving innovation in digital customer engagement and content strategy in life sciences. Welcome, everyone. So let's start off with you, Daniel. Walk us through the traditional content creation and what that approach looks like. Unfortunately, we seem to be having slight technical difficulties. So let's kick off this session with Natalia. Natalia, I'm going to ask you the same question that I posed to Daniel. Walk us through the traditional content creation and what that approach looks like.
Yes, a very good question to ask, because we are an agency. You know how the traditional works is looking, right? So because traditionally we are creating content brand specific, there is franchise specific, there are a lot of specifics up to the markets and to the business needs. So we are not really standardizing from the scratch. So to say, today we will be talking about how this game is changing and how we are changing this game with the modular approach, because we are right now in the era of omni-channel. Going omni-channel, bringing the specific experience in the specific place to the specific customer, and even more when you're trying to manage your commercial needs with marrying all of these commercial goals with the value-based search of your customer through different channels. You really need to go personal to deliver a personal message and to do it at scale. This is the task for every marketer today in every organization. So how we can deliver at scale the omni-channel content. And this is the modularity where it starts. This is the task for modular approach, because to personalize, we need to standardize. And personalization at the biggest scale is just the next step in the findability of the content. Your content has to be structured, tagged, findable. So you have to be aware that you are building this for your client to find, to have a value of it, and to measure and to repeat. So means you cannot block it in the format, you cannot make it unsearchable, you are not relying on this former experience no longer. I think René and Julian can support me in this.
I was about to pitch in. Renee, please sort of follow up on Natalia's thought there and talk about, the traditional approaches and omni-channel with modularity. And Julian, please jump in. While we wait for Daniel, I believe that he's going to be joining us in a moment. Just give him a tad bit of time. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me in this panel. I really look forward to the discussion. I think Natalia already covered a lot here. What I would like to echo is, like, why is this old traditional model of content creation not working anymore? So I think the world in terms of HCP engagement, also MSL engagement has changed dramatically in the last few years, right? So everything turned digital. And as you know, like in our jobs, there is so many different channels, so many different messages that reach us every day, every second. So it's hard for us to filter what is really relevant and what not. So in the end, the big challenge also in this topic here is how to get through the clutter. How do you position your message at the HCP? And I think personalization is a very important thing that Natalia mentioned here. But what we are discussing today is how do you really get there? How can you deliver personalized content at scale? And I think this is where the old traditional model just doesn't work anymore, because on one hand, you have like very static and fixed materials like emails or e-detailers, which are not really catered to the preferences of an HCP. And at the same time, it would be super expensive to personalize that content. And it's a lot of work, so you just don't have that time. You need to be almost real time in order to get that content out. And I think this is where the old model just does not fit the purpose anymore. So we have to find ways how to be very quick, how to personalize the content, and how to basically play it out via the different channels that the HCP prefers. And I think this is where we go modular, where you really have to find a way to cut the content into pieces, to assemble it, and then get it out as fast as possible.
Thank you so much for that answer, Renee. While we still wait for Daniel, I see that he's trying to join us. Slight technical difficulties. Please give us a bit of time there. Julian, perhaps an obvious question here. Oh, Daniel, welcome. We're so glad you were able to join us finally.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. So I hope you can see me now. Had some trouble with the camera, and yeah, now I'm here.
Excellent. We're glad that you're with us. I was about to pose a question to Julian to follow up on Renee's thoughts. Perhaps an obvious question, but feel free to jump in, Daniel, as well. What was the trigger for your organization to go with modular content, and why at this moment, at this particular time?
So I think if you go back in what is our job in as part of the marketing and medical organization of any big pharma company, to be honest, is to build a relationship with the physicians that help the patients and, if fit, leverage our products, right? And to build better relationships, we have proven, and I think other industries have proven that before us, that the key is more relevant conversation, which triggers personalization, right? And I think I don't want to elaborate again why personalization is so important. Renee pointed out, Natalia pointed out, and the direct link between personalization and modular content is just the sheer volumes, and then also the ability to adapt. Because in our world, we do a lot of global brand strategies and communication strategies that get tailored and adapted to markets, right? Because our conversations with physicians happen locally. Now, we need to enable the markets to adapt the messaging, not get one final form of an asset and then basically start from scratch if they want to change something in order to drive the personalization. They need to be able to easily mix and match and adapt it to the individual needs of local customers. And that's what modular content is doing for us.
Daniel, I think we have you on the line now. I'd like you to follow up on that and talk about he dropped out again on us as I was about to ask him a question. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
In that case, let's stick to the audio part. Perhaps your camera will listen to us next time. Daniel, I wanted to follow up on Julian's answer and talk about what, in your experience, has been one of the key hurdles when it comes to implementing modular approach. And we sort of will ease into our next subject when it comes to actual organizational hurdles and pitfalls. So talk about your personal experience there.
Yes, so I think the area where I was mostly involved in, or the areas where like the requirements, processes, and platforms, and I think there are many aspects to consider. It's not as easy as it might be at the first place. So, for example, when it comes to the process and the definitions, an organization may want to start with a question: what is a content module for us? What does it mean? How big or how small can it be? And this might differ from company to company. So there is not an out-of-the-box solution, but some work to be done. And then comes the technology. So I think when we started this topic, or when I started at least a couple of years ago, I think we had great visions, but the technology was not there yet. This has improved a lot, I have to say. So technology is much better today, but still the platforms need to be configured to your needs, right? Again, there's not an out-of-the-box solution, because it should fit to your process and to your purpose. And last but not least, the overall complexity, right? I think we have discussed or talked about the content creation process, the segments, everything that need to be considered. Now we're just adding one level to this mix, right? Which is the modules dimension. And this is, I think, really a learning process. And it maybe, yeah, it will take some time to, you know, to have the organization to adapt to this model. That this is what I've seen so far.
Natalia, Renee, would you like to follow up on that thought?
I think yes. Thank you, Renee. I think if adding to this topic, alignment between the vendors, between the agencies about the definitions, about the subject of the project, right? Because like even the simplest basic things, like what is module, what is content reuse, shall we lock the module in some format, or shall we unlock it? What kind of template are you going to use? Should it be static, defined, destined for particular brand, franchise, or particular location, or it has to be dynamic? So it has to work with different franchises and different brands. So all of these definitions are the key, the milestone where we can build, where we can align and onboard all the vendors. For me and for us at VISEVEN, the key success factors is first, alignment between the partners. Everyone understands at the same level the basics. Then we aligned on the roles, because no one is going to be faster than someone, right, building. So we have to work as a one team, and the success of one is success of many. We have to define that rules and work as a team. So that's the criteria. Renee, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think what you guys are saying here, that it's like the sheer size of this change is like involving almost the entire organization, and even like suppliers, like creative agencies. It involves people, processes, tools, like all the technology. And I think in the end, as Daniel said, I like that. We all had like great visions, but when we started working on it, like the processes were not there. The tools were not like 100% ready, and then like bringing all these people on one table, and then defining the tools, defining the processes, evolving the technology. I think this was like a super big challenge in the past, but I think this is progressing over time, and I think this is also a critical success factor, to come together, hear different opinions, hear how like people's work processes will change over time, and then involve that in the process or in the tool development. I think this is a good point you mentioned there.
Absolutely. Julian,
adding to that, sorry, just want to add to René's talk, just adding to that, within the technology, within the tools, like what we can see today, like the picture is ultimately defragmented. So we have bits and pieces of the tech solutions we need, and why it is so difficult, because in the most of the time we need to integrate and to create this end-to-end story, and it looks like it adds the difficulty here. And one of the mistakes everyone is doing, like also is a common mistake, trying to take the old content and to put it into the new tech environment. So this is everyone is doing today as well. So we need to understand that assembling of the content is completely brand new. How you create the sentences, messages, claims, tagging, structure, semantic, everything is new. And the toolkit is new, is particular for your organization. Sorry, Julian, if I interrupted.
I wanted Julian to sort of follow up on René's thought, and now Natalia's as well. From a client's perspective, what role does management commitment may play? What your take is on the fact that Natalia had mentioned, you know, trying to fit in old measures into new ones, how to approach that? What do you think?
So, I mean, management commitment is pretty broad, obviously, in large corporations, right? There's many different levels of management. And as in any transformative initiative in large corporations, management commitment is crucial, right? In my experience, it was rather easy to get the top management buy-in because the business case is so clear, right? The bigger challenge and the difficulties are on the brand management level. Because those are the people whose day-to-day is going to change, and it's going to change drastically when they work with content and create content for their brands. And this is where I believe the most investment into change management and coaching them and working with them is important. And I've seen both sides, working as on the brand side as well as now working on the content strategy side. And then the second most important piece in terms of the commitment and buy-in is really the marketing agencies who are going to create content, produce content for those brand teams. There's a lot of challenges due to their used ways of working. They often scale and do the same methodology over many different clients. Other clients out there are probably not doing modular content, so it's also a change. Which actually is the reason why we founded our own in-house content studio that provides content services to global and local brand teams, so that we have a better handle on that end.
Thank you so much for that, Julian. René, I wanted to jump in there, and Daniel, welcome back again. I wanted to jump in and ask, from your personal background, you do have a background as a project manager, and talk about further challenges have you experienced personally in your work, but obviously working with clients. What are they and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, so I think what is a big challenge is that it's like when you work introduce modular content strategy, it is an end-to-end process you're implementing. An end-to-end meaning like from a brand perspective, you're both looking upstream, which is the creative direction, and you're also looking downstream when it comes to providing global content to the local markets for localization, and in the end to be like distributed via different channels. So it's like you're involving hundreds of people in the organization, and even if you do it like for different brands or for different therapeutic areas, you're adding more and more layers to that. So I think like the sheer size of that change is a big challenge. So you're changing the way how creative agencies create content. You're changing the way how global brand teams create their brand stories, how they develop like stories in terms of modules, key messages, everything. You change the format, how you provide these content packages to the markets, because it's not like a fixed asset anymore. It's like a kind of module toolbox or something like the local people can use to assemble their own individualized content. And last but not least, you're also changing the way for M&R, right? Because they are not approving an asset anymore. They might be approving a modular toolbox, where they can see different combinations, permutations, different headlights that can be used. So it adds a lot of layers of complexity. So I think this is a big challenge here and a common pitfall. But now, focusing a little bit more, maybe starting from the creative agency side of things. So when you have, let's say, I don't know, 10 global brands, you're typically working with 10 different creative agencies. So that means, depending on where they are, if they have worked with, or in terms of modular content before or not, you also have different levels of experience. And then also, every pharma company has their own way of doing modular content. There is no such thing as one fixed way of doing modular content. So what you need to do, or what is a very critical success factor, is to have a proper governance. What is a module? What is a template? So what we used to have in the past is you have a brand guideline, right? Which is all the creative things, but now you need to evolve that brand guideline and also have the guidance for your modules in there. And then you need to make sure that the creative agencies are onboarded on those, that they know, okay, usually it starts with a brief, right? Between the global brand team and the creative agency. We still have that brief, but it looks completely different. So we are turning the way of working completely upside down. And I think it's very important to have a constant alignment. I think it's not sufficient to have one initial onboarding and then let them run, let them work. I think it's important to have an ongoing alignment, even between suppliers, global brand teams, and also when it comes to local markets, local teams who are localizing the content, they also need constant support.
Excellent. Thank you so much, René. Daniel, would you like to follow up on that thought? If you're with us, Natalia, perhaps you can pitch in, talk about, what other struggles are there? Perhaps a fear of experimentation. I know you mentioned that a lot in your webinars, the fact that people are struggling to experiment and they want to. So talk a little bit about that as well, please.
This is the normal and, completely human behavior, right? To fear of this experiment, because we are all fearing to fail, right? So even there is this fail fast theory, we're still in a great deal of fear to understand where we can fail. First of all, this is the completely new theory when we, in our normal content governance, we are embed something like module and the modular strategy, right? So then it's really brings us to the level where we need to not to go into the copy paste trap, where we need to understand on the same level everyone what reuse is, that this module is a channel agnostic entity. It has to be created once, retired once, and from the very same place. It's not going to copy it and creating enormous amount of the not reusable content. So better to the point, where my experience is with the hurdles. Recently, we introduced proof of concept, as someone told us this is the most realistic way to try what the module is, what the modular content is. And once we are arriving to the customer, there is never a green grass. There is always already this helpful content, I would say helpful approach introduced, like DCF, Digital Content Factory, or there is an agency of choice downstream creating all the content. I'm not talking upstream, talking about downstream. So because this is also very important, because deployment and management of the ready pieces, this is really important. And since the organization at scale cannot start from the day one, let us say on Monday we are doing everything in the different way. We need to do everything in the different way, so we are doing that from Monday. No, this is not going to happen. So, and they are inviting someone like us, usually with the proof of concept, where this the tool, the strategy, the systems, so everything to try. So, and you can understand when we implement the experiment, yes, it's successful, and then the struggle is how to multiply this experiment to all the agencies and the agency of choice, sharing little by little all the experience with template, with module, and do not drop the speed of production. And this is the mystery. What is like, we shouldn't drop the speed of production. We have really to gain on it. So they have to be faster. They have to learn how to reuse. They have to be the advocates of this. And this is the bigger affair and the bigger challenge. So this is, I think everyone knows that.
Daniel, Julian, any thoughts on the challenges?
Yeah, I think I can only echo what Natalia said. That of course, if you embark on this journey, let's implement modular content and let's use the benefits. People might have high expectations, but it's not as easy as like flipping the switch, right? It takes some time. So I think it's important that in such a project, you make sure to always deliver working increments step by step, so that you know, people see how the whole thing develops, and that you also involve the so-called users and different departments, so that they can part of the journey and they see how this develops step by step. I think this helps to address concerns and objections. So I think a kind of agile approach makes sense here to really go step by step. And then yeah, again, stakeholder management, I think as always, as we have heard from earlier statements by René and also Natalia, that there's a lot of different departments and stakeholders involved. And in pharma, for example, commercial and medical affairs. So it's really important to keep them, you know, in the loop. And what I personally also learned a lot is that it is important to address user feedback, right? It might be that along the journey you learn users, you know, like this or don't like that, and it's always important to address these needs to really make them part of this development. Because I think if they don't like it, they won't use it, they won't support you. Because as you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? There's nothing you can do about it. So let the users and your colleagues be part of this journey.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate that answer. Speaking of users, please, to all our audience, submit your questions. We'd be more than happy to answer them towards the end of our session. So if you do have any questions for our experts today, please submit them. We will be happy to answer them. Julian, I'd like to follow up on that a tad bit more and talk about, you know, what does that mean for your organization adopting modular content strategy and in terms of the benefits and the growth? We talked about the challenges, but let's talk about the positives here.
So in terms of the benefits, right? Or maybe let's give transparency for everybody in this call or in this webinar to understand the status quo, right? So today we publish all global content as modular content, period. Right? So this is where we are from a maturity perspective. So what does that do for us as an entire organization? I think the first look at our core KPIs, we can see at all of them positive trends. We're not there where we want to be, but we see positive trends in all of them. That means we have internally facing more content use, externally facing, we have better customer engagement, and financially we have more cost efficiencies, right? So all of these trends go up, which is good. Now, beyond those KPIs, when we look at what is it we do as a content team, right? So we help the marketing build better relevant content, but also maybe easier with less of a headache, right? So that is much more, how do we enable marketing teams to engage with the customers? Or how do we help marketing teams measure the impact of their content and then derive better decisions and build better content, different content, better matching messaging for a specific customer segment next time. Right? So those are a little bit more fluid, and this is where content, which was really like a downstream activity at some point, all of a sudden integrates backwards into like more the strategy, the messaging, the segmentation and such. And this is where we currently focus on to have really content not really a consequence of a strategy, but rather an integrated piece that is fully embedded, and we right from the start think about it. What are we going to talk about with our customers, and how will that make them feel? How will that enable our teams build better relationships, and hence drive to better business outcomes.
Natalia, Renee, you want to jump in a tad bit more to talk about the outcomes for the clients and better business relationships?
Yeah, I just have a question to Julian about the translation and localization, because I know like this is something maybe our audience wants to know. That's where we will be able to measure some improvements in how this content is localized, translated, and whenever we can really reuse it, not making and repeating the mistakes and duplicating the work, right? And having the non-automated publishing, but translating is the key. If you can elaborate on this, that would be very interesting indeed.
Yeah, so you clearly hit one of the pain points of the old system, the old world, right? The translation of globally, usually English provided content. And that is not something that goes away. You always need to translate language, right? But modular content, enables us to translate easier, in a sense of you just extract the text and do the translation. We even go to a degree where we do part of the translation or the first round of translation with AIs, and then just do a quality check by humans and so on, in order to drive up speed and cost efficiencies as well. But the second piece, and this is really what comes out of the modular content, is in the old world, you created one material and the market wanted to use it, they translate the entire material. Now they configure it in a modular way, only pick the modules they want to use, and only those get translated, which cuts our translation volume down by, I don't have an exact number, but a rough guess would be 40%, right? So we're not translating useless pieces of content, basically, which is a huge win for everybody.
Thank you very much for this insight, Renee, please.
Yeah, or like even one step further, what could be done is you kind of already program the translation into the module in the first place, right? When you know your module will be used in Spanish, in Italian, in German, or whatever, you already like create the module in a translated way, so you can just like pick and choose between the different translations. And maybe there might be also some graphical amendments needed, like you need a black triangle, or you like in one case you need a colorful graph, in the other case you need more like a scientific plain gray graph. So you could also like build these eventualities already in the module, which helps you to bring down the localization volume, not only translation but also localization volume down by far. Maybe Julian, to you, is this like already in the cards for you? Is this something you're thinking about?
Yes and no. So what is the, like, pragmatically speaking, the difference in a sense when you code the translation into the module, right? It's one module where the graphic elements would be the same, the text elements would be different, right? When we do localization, we do more than just translation, right? We also have sometimes different claims, different references and such. So we definitely see that eventually we want to have this one module which is talking about one specific key message, and then depending on in which market we use that module, it automatically pulls the right language, the right references, the right claims into everything. But we're not there from a maturity perspective. And that's also, there's so many elements attached in it. And I believe that goes a little bit towards the next maturity step that we have in mind, which maybe we can talk about later a little bit, which goes into this dynamic way of content, which obviously modular content is a prerequisite, but maybe that's going too far ahead. So in short, yes, we're thinking about it. Are we doing it that way? No. The Spanish module is a copy of the English module. It's not the same with different languages in it.
Julian, that will be the topic of our next webinar. We'll go back to that. I'd like to ask Renee, you sort of touched on it, but we'll talk about the effectiveness, right, of modular content at the present moment. How do you measure it? The numbers matter at the end of the day, right? So talk about measuring the effectiveness of modular as we speak.
So I think the engagement KPIs are the same KPIs, or more or less the same KPIs in the old system, right? That just the way we measure it, or the abilities to measure it that come with modular content are slightly different, or let's say improved. So like when it comes to how a piece of content resonates with the HCP, right? So in the past, when you have like only one piece of content, of course, you can only track or capture how the entire piece of content resonates with the HCP. So like with a modular approach, this opens a new, or like a more granularity in terms of how to track the engagement, and then also like to feed it back into the cycle that what Julian said in the beginning. So basically, you can define a key message. You have a set of key message or core messages, like depending on how you call it, for a brand story. And then like when you assemble your story, which might be like different for different HCPs, right? It might go into different directions. You can track the engagement for the different stories, or even on a modular level. So that helps you on the one hand to understand how does a module as a standalone piece resonate, and on the other hand, how does the module in the context of other modules resonate with a specific group of HCPs or whatever. So like it enables you to measure like a lot of different things, and then you can try to pull insights out of that and feed it back into the content creation. So you can basically optimize your content in cycles. And of course, I think there is like again the same discussion. What is possible with the technology we have? So like we could open the vision and say, okay, there is an AI which is collecting the data, and then it's feeding back the insights into the content creation, and it adapts the content in an automatic way, like real time. This would be the ultimate vision. Are we there? No, not at all. So I think the interesting discussion is how can we get there, and what are the incremental improvements along the way? Like modular content is the mandatory prerequisite you need to have in order to get there. But what are the next incremental steps to track the effectiveness of your content, and how do you feed these insights back into your content creation, and how can you like increase the automation of this process over time? We cannot hear you, Julia. I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Yes.
Look at that. Technical difficulties on my end as well. Renee, thank you so much for that answer. I wanted to ask Natalia, perhaps she could follow up on your point, and I'd love to sum up the benefits of modular content as it stands today, and then sort of talk about, you know, best practices and success factors as we move on. So perhaps you could touch a little bit on what Renee had just said about the measurement of effectiveness of modular content.
Yeah, you know, like there is nothing new. All of us were talking about this, so we need to understand our new KPIs, so which will be leading us to the new efficiency in business, because this is the well-known fact that if we personalize at scale, it means we sell more. Right, so sales will be growing, because personalization means this is a value for me, for you, for everyone. So this is not just the buzzword, and this is not just the next step of findability of the content, like the basics of content strategy say. So that's why we will have not only the operational benefits, where we are having faster time to market, we can have our bigger production at scale, where we are not duplicating the efforts, we localize, translate with the more savings, and we're not repeating the mistakes. We're creating the whole servers of the translating memories, which are helping us with suggesting the translation for the new models. So we are having AI helping us. All of these these are the goals, and these are the answers why we need to go there. And this is, as Julian told us, this is the prerequisite for the next smart content or intelligent content, where these operational benefits will be just helping us, and they are just one stepping stone to all of this new picture. So that's why we need to go, we need to follow this. Whenever it is difficult or not, whenever it is well understood or not, this is how this content to be created in the future for the new generation of consumers. And you see, like, the content is different themselves. It leaves how 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So we need more content, faster, and with a bigger quality.
Thank you, Natalia, for that. Julian, in that case, your name was brought up. I'd like you to talk about the implementation and the success factors of the professional project when it comes to modular content. Perhaps talk about best practices and your experience.
So to summarize the best practice, I would say prove that it works in your organization, right? Everybody has seen proof that it works outside, any case studies and anything, but prove that it works with your teams and your organizations, and prove it end to end, not just a piece of it, but really from first ideas, creative, to all the way to the customer engagement, right? The entire value chain of content, basically. And then focus on the human factor. We heard early on that when we as Bayer embarked on this journey, we had like technology wasn't really mature enough. We were partnering with VISEVEN in order to co-develop the technology and be also one of the pioneers and really shape the technology in a way how we need it. But I'd say today the technology is almost there, right? For the basic pieces, it's definitely there. So instead of focusing on the technology early on, I would really focus only on the human factor. It's so crucial and it's often neglected. And that comes that instead of chasing platform milestones, you should really look at building the momentum in your business teams and sustain the momentum. That's much more crucial compared to, oh, did we switch this API on, or did we link that system, or and these kind of things. So that would be my 3 best practices or key success factors. The fourth one, Natalia touched upon this sort of, is measure your success, right? It's and when I say measure the success, I'd always start going backwards from what's the financial impact, like you said, on the sales side. What's the customer experience, right? You deliver with modular content. How are your internal operations working? Time to market, satisfaction of the users using the systems, usage rates of content modules, how often is it reused, localized, translated, all these pieces. And then lastly, the cost effectiveness, right? Always compared to, okay, this is how much it cost me to create this. Obviously, this is the financial impact, so you see your ROI, but also compare it to the old world. So what would have been the cost to just give just the briefing to one agency and hard code this all these contents, right? So you have a little bit of a benchmark compared to the old way of doing content, but you also have your new ROI always in scope.
Julian, thank you so much for that answer. Very insightful. Renee, I'd like you to follow up on that and perhaps talk about how companies can ensure that the rubber hits the road, so to speak. Talk about, local marketing and sales teams actually fully leveraging the potential of modular content.
Yeah, that's a good point, how to make the rubber hit the road, right? So let's assume you have done your program. Sometimes over years, you have developed the technology, you have integrated the technology end to end, the content is flowing, all the processes are defined and rolled out, and yet you have to get this huge system operational. And I think, as Julian said, the business case is super clear. So I think it's super clear to embark on this journey, but in the end, to make the business case work, adoption and change management is really the critical thing. So basically, what can you do, or how do you get the entire organization to work like a gearbox, that every wheel is connected with each other and communicates with each other, and you have a flawless operation. And I think here the success factor adoption and change management is super important. First of all, to really touch on it, you need a kind of system or a way to measure your adoption. Okay, so what are the different KPIs on the creative upstream, what are the KPIs on a global level, on MLR level, and also, I think most importantly, what are the KPIs on a local level, so that you can understand which local organizations are performing well and which organizations might need some more help. So how does this adoption and change management look like? I think there is two main components to it. One is training and the other is support. So having a very good and responsive support organization, I think, is very critical. I think there's nothing more annoying, even when you especially when you work with new processes or tools, if there is issues in the first hours of usage and you can't solve them, you will not work with it again. So I think this is super critical to have people in place who can help answer questions and troubleshoot. On the other hand, I think as we are changing the whole way of working, it's super important to have proper training materials. And I think it's not sufficient to have a global rollout where you train the trainer and then the trainers train the people locally. It is only once, and then maybe there is 8 or 12 weeks until they use the system or the process again, and they might forget it. Or there might be new people coming into the roles and they have never heard of the process before, right? So you need to have some proper training, on-demand training, maybe some e-learnings or whatever in place, super users, to make sure that all the people that have to work with the system get a proper training and proper support. And I think this is underestimated in a lot of times in many organizations, because also, as we said, we are improving the process and the tool incrementally. There is a release every 4 weeks or something. How do you make sure that the changes also reach the people in the markets? Because otherwise you lose them along the way, and then the adoption decreases. So I think this is really an ongoing thing that has to be done, because otherwise, yeah, we will not reach the business case from my point of view.
Definitely, that is something that's very crucial, the right training, but also making sure that people get the right access to the training. Natalia, I'd like you to follow up on that thought and perhaps talk about the tools that ultimately lead to better results and improve the quality of the process.
Yes, that is a very good point. I want also just to bring a little operational hints to support Julian and René talks. Once we are onboarding the teams and we are connecting the dots, we are fighting with the people resistance for this change, right? So, and within our training sessions, and I like Julian just said, we need to sustain the moments, right? We need to keep these moments in the focus. So we need to bring KPIs not only external, but also internal. We need to understand, while we are modularizing the experience, how long it taken to find the needed piece of the content, how long it taken to wait from the chatbot or from the supporter to get the answer to the question, right? How much search queries your colleagues are doing to locate the module you need. So having all of these small operational hints as the KPIs will also help to fight this resistance and to be successful, because this is important for these moments, right? No one wants to be unhappy in the experience of this. Talking about the tools very fast, first of all, we need to cover end-to-end the process. And even today, when I mentioned before, there are a lot of attempts to provide end-to-end experience, but still they work in the connection. We need to think about upstream, downstream, from the planning to the execution and deployment. And that means this piece, modular content piece, it starts from the design, from the upstream. It's not only how this to be executed, it starts from how it's planned, how it's created. So that's why the environment, the technical environment, the tools, it has to be the orchestrated environment of digital asset management, planning, content authoring, deployment, AI tools connected to your CRM, because this is for your customers. And then with your segmentation mechanism, because this is next. Once you are doing this automated process of modularization, then you need to think that you do not have only 3 personas and everyone knows them, right? They are only having different names. So you have to think how the impact goes customers more. So this is the completely orchestrated solution.
Yeah, thank you so much for that explanation, Natalia. Daniel, perhaps you can jump in as well. I'd like to underline the fact that, you know, tools and processes and their quality make a huge difference, obviously, but also the right training, the professional. Julian just left us for a second, but hopefully, oh, there we go. Yeah. Hopefully, we'll talk about obviously the right tools, but access to training, making sure that early involvement and integrations are also in place. Daniel, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the impact of what makes an impact on the success factor of implementing modular content.
Yeah, I think that let's say in the traditional process where we create a standalone piece, right, a ready-made piece, sometimes the process feels as easy as PowerPoint, right? But obviously the platforms that we now have to work with in order to really create modular content are slightly different. It's not PowerPoint. Still, we should try to aim for a PowerPoint-like user experience, because, you know, the tools should be easy. But I think the nature of the process, as we discussed already, has somewhat complexity behind. So that's why I feel that at least in certain areas of the organization, a centralized service makes sense to guide the users or the different departments through the content creation process, because at least in the beginning of the process, there's so many aspects and learnings that need to be considered. I think this should be really a guided process. So that's why having a central service, a team of experts who can guide the content creators through the process definitely is recommended. Even after this initial phase, let's make sure that the tools are easy to use, that the user can follow, and that they only see the complexity that they really need to see. I think we are still in a learning phase, but again, what I see is really this approach. Let the content creators really focus on their main task and make it as easy as possible. So it means it's not only the moment you start creating content, but it's also the planning phase that needs to adapt. We mentioned the tracking and analytics. You know, there's a wide range of processes involved, and this is really a step-by-step process, and really need to go step by step and involve the different teams and really make sure that you have a simple process that users can follow, and to make them understand the value that they get out of this.
Thank you so much for that, Daniel. I truly appreciate that answer. As promised, we have just a tad bit of time left. The hour almost flew by, which is great. Let's get to our Q&A section, where we're going to talk about, you know, what our audience wants to know. But not to worry, if we did not get to all the questions, our experts will answer them. Feel free to scan the QR code. It will take you to the right Contact Us page. And then if you do have follow-up questions, please submit them there. Let's start off with one of the more obvious questions. What sort of reduction in outlay of costs are we looking at when moving from standard content plans to modular plans? Who's going to take that question?
Do you want to know the numbers, or do you want to know the percentage, or do you want the commitment?
Let's touch on all of them, and then I'm sure our viewer will submit his question further and get in touch. But let's touch on all three as much as possible.
I think all three connected, because once you have the complete commitment and you can see your operational hurdles in, like, you are replicating the efforts in some particular field, you can then estimate the efforts and you can focus on cutting these efforts as the priority number one, because as we have mentioned before, you can put your bid on the translation effort, so you can cut it. You can make the localization process easier because you can understand how to reuse. For instance, you can reuse a lot of things, so, and you can share them, so you can start reducing your budget on deployment, optimize, automate out there. So then standardize the templates you are creating, share the standard planning process with the modularity needs. So there are a lot of hints. You just need to find your thing which has taken the most effort while you are scaling your omni-channel experience today. So it depends how much do you want to save.
Julian, perhaps it's going to be a thank you for that answer, Natalia. Perhaps this is a question for you. What is the best balance between global guidelines and local adaptations? You talked about localization and translation in the past, so I'd like you to follow up on that.
Well, I'd like to share that if, like, at a point in time where we really nailed part of the global content, and I think no pharma company is speaking from. I'm speaking quite a lot to my colleagues in other companies really did that yet. But the point of global guidelines is really like create what is needed everywhere, right? Something that's adaptable, that's not super specific, and then give as much freedom as possible locally to fit personalized needs. And that really goes into, like, while I believe the question before was a little bit of a fallacy, right? Modular content is not a cost-cutting exercise. It's a because, like we said early on, we have proven as an industry that personalized customer engagement deliver better outcomes, better results financially, in terms of relationships, in terms of customer experience on all the different frontiers. And the only way to get there is modular content. It's impossible to do that in the old way, financially impossible, right? Because it would be ridiculously expensive to like hard code and full asset for every customer in the world, right? So that's not possible. But also the time it would take, the management overhead, you would have all these elements. It's just it's not possible, period, right? So in terms of the cost reductions, I think that's that should be more seen as a, can I increase my top line? Can I create a better customer experience while keeping the budgets in a range where I need them to be, right? Maybe that's a bit of a vague answer, but that is, in my opinion, the right one to ask. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that for that answer.
Thank you, Julian. While we still have a tad bit of time, Renee, I'd like you to ask one of the questions that came in is about MLR process, and how does that work when you publish global content and when it gets localized? How much time do you save, and what is the expectation in terms of time saving, not cost saving, but time saving part?
I think there's multiple dimensions to that question. I think there is a global LMR approval and a local LMR approval, right? So when you create global templates or global content, it needs to be LMR approved globally, but then after localization, it needs another local MLR approval before it can be sent out, right? So when it comes to, or like the question is, what is the cost reduction or the increase of speed, right? I think that really depends. I think that's the diplomatic answer here. So if you manage to like create instead of a fixed piece, you have a modular toolbox that MLR people are improving, there is a huge number of possible combinations, which increases the effort for the MLR approval. But then you need to kind of start introducing business rules, which lowers the number of possible combinations. And this makes it a bit more approvable. Or what you can even do, and I think this is like few steps down the road, you can start working with kind of pre-approved modules. So where you have like a module, you have all the business rules, where when our reviewers see, okay, these are all the possible combinations, and they approve a module in the context of the entire modular toolbox, so that it does not require an additional approval down the road, right? So you have like a full toolbox that is completely pre-approved, all the potential combinations. And then in the end, the user can assemble their own piece of content, and it does not need approval anymore because it's already pre-approved. But I think, again, this is a few steps down the road. I think most companies are not there yet, but this would be an ideal case to decrease the effort again. But I think in the first place, the effort might be even slightly increasing, because instead of a very clear fixed module, you have a module that might appear in different ways or forms.
Renee, thank you so much for that answer. I also hope that it works for our viewer that asked you that question. In case you have more questions, please scan the QR codes and ask away as much as you can. I'm sure all our experts will be more than happy to answer them. I would like to say thank you to everyone that attended the webinar, but also our experts today, Julian Hacker, Daniel Lawrence, even though he had slight technical difficulties today, Renee Crawling, Natalia Andrzejczyk, thank you so much. It was a truly exciting and inspirational and very insightful session, and I hope our viewers enjoyed it as much as I did. I thank you for your time and look forward to our next webinar together.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.